When you take a look at some of the biggest brands in the world today, they're not Apple, they're not Nike, they're Oprah, they're Joe Rogan, they're Tony Robbins. I think the future is no longer a bunch of W-2 employees, but rather everybody working for themselves and creating a monopoly of one.
Ayman Al Abdullah, former CEO of AppSumo, where he led them from a 3 million to a 80+ million. Today, he helps 7-figure founders become 9-figure CEOs.
What everyone needs to do is figure out what is the thing that you were born to do, what is the thing that you're uniquely qualified to do, and what's the thing that you would do even if no one would ever find out about it, and dedicate your life to becoming world-class at that.
It's like sometimes someone must ask you a question and you just don't know the answer. Like, what do you do then? Like, everyone's looking at you in the room and they're like, he's the CEO. He's the guy that's meant to know. I'm curious if there is a time in your life where you just felt lost, just didn't know the answer.
I remember being at Microsoft, looking around the room, realizing how many of my peers that had joined Microsoft with me were aspiring for VP and up-level positions. And the more they talked about it, the more I felt repulsed by that direction. I want to have a direct impact on the bottom line. I do not want to make another PowerPoint presentation that doesn't see the light of day.
What made you make the jump and leave all of that to pursue something different?
One of the mottos that I have in life is go towards that which scares but excites you.
Before we get into the video, YouTube analytics say that 90% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you want to see even bigger guests, better conversations, please subscribe. It really helps us grow the podcast. And with that, onto the video. Okay, so the Callum Johnson Show. On today's episode, we have Ayman Al Abdullah. Ayman, welcome to the show, my man.
Callum, thank you so much for inviting me, man. Excited to be here.
I know. We were talking on the way up. It's been a long time coming.
I know. I think you reached out to me, 9 months ago?
Yeah.
So we've been back and forth trying to coordinate schedules, and just so happened that the universe aligned and we were able to be in the same city at the same time. Here we are.
And I was saying to you as well, I was like, those are always the best episodes in my experience. The ones that you're trying to plan them for the longest time, and then a few things just align at one moment, and
Callum,
here we are.
You cannot be putting that kind of pressure on me.
This has to be the best episode.
No, 100%. This is the one that's going to go viral. This is the one with millions of views. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. No, I'm excited to be here, man. I'm excited to finally meet in person. I know we've exchanged a couple phone calls. We've exchanged a couple Zoom calls. So it's always great to turn the Zoom world into the real world.
Yeah, there's nothing better than doing that. Okay, here's where I want to begin. So Ayman, former CEO of AppSumo, you grew the business from $3 million to $80 million. Now you do a bunch of CEO coaching, executive coaching for a number of CEOs, helping them grow their businesses. So I say all of that to say you've worked with a bunch of CEOs. You've been a CEO. I want to start by just speaking to the aspiring entrepreneurs, the person that's potentially working in a company and is looking to rise through the ranks and maybe be CEO one day. What would you say is the most common misconception that people have about the role of CEO? This episode is brought to you by Free Agency. If you want to take your career to the next level, Free Agency is a company that you should check out. They manage and represent talent in the tech industry, and they provide you with a dedicated talent agent to help you find, engage, and win top of market roles that will maximize your earning potential. No more leaving money on the table. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with Free Agency. Anyway, back to the show.
So those are two different questions. So the question regards if someone's an aspiring CEO, they're currently working at a company and they're trying to climb their way up, or it's someone that's an aspiring entrepreneur. And that's probably maybe my biggest distinction, is that those are two very different roles. The 0 to 1 role, getting a company off the ground, is completely different than the CEO role, which is taking that company, now that it's achieved product market fit, taking it to the next level. So if I were to go deeper in one of those two, which one would be most interesting to you?
You know what? Let's start with the 0 to 1.
Yeah.
The person that's like an aspiring, they want to create something, they want to build something. Let's start there, and then we can go to the person who kind of looking to come through the ranks.
I think the hardest thing that most aspiring entrepreneurs, they struggle with is actually who do they serve? I think that oftentimes that's the number one question that any brand new company needs to analyze, is not just the total addressable market, but rather the total touchable market, the TTM. And I'm gonna unpack that a little bit more. Oftentimes we come up with incredible business idea, but we don't actually go deeper into who do we actually serve? Who is really important? I'll give you a great example of that. There was an aspiring playwright. He had spent years writing plays, going above and beyond, to the point where he was spending his entire life savings, Callum, putting out these plays and no one was showing up. And he was actually living out of a 95 Geo Metro, homeless, and going, this is not working. What do I do? And when he analyzed who was actually showing up to his plays, who was actually going above and beyond, like actually enjoyed it, it was Southern Christian women. They were the one that showed up, Southern Christian church-going women. So he's like, I'm going to make the next play catered to that Southern Christian church-going woman, to the point where he was inviting the local church choir to be part of the play. He was using that. They were inviting the church to, he included a lot of biblical sayings and biblical stories as part of the play. All of a sudden, that particular play started to sell out. The churches started selling out. He started doing tours. More and more people started coming around. This was in the 90s. He was handing out sheets of paper, collecting emails. Like this was before ConvertKit and MailChimp. Like this was before email lists was a thing. And with each new play where he kept doubling down on the Southern Christian church-going woman, he got more and more notoriety, more and more success, to the point where today he's a billionaire. His name's Tyler Perry. And he made one single decision, which is, who do I serve? And I would say the hardest thing that most first-time entrepreneurs struggle with, instead of you trying to go and live out of a 95 Geo Metro to find this solution, get deeply, deeply curious about who am I uniquely qualified to serve, and how do I scratch my own itch and then sell the solution to them.
You know what's interesting? Okay, no, because I love that point, and I love when you say, "Who do I serve?" And when you said that, something instantly came to mind, which is there's a distinction, and I know I fell into this trap. There's a difference between who do I serve and who do I want to serve. And what I mean by that is usually when you start a company, when you have an idea, there's an inspiration. There's maybe you're starting a hardware technology company because you've been following Steve Jobs and Apple for all of these years.
Totally.
And you're like, I want to build the next version of that. You're like, you have this dream of who you're going to serve. That's who do you want to serve. But then you actually start creating the business, you start creating a product, you start selling the product. That's kind of when it's like, who do you actually serve versus in your vision, in your dream, the person that you wanted to serve. And sometimes it's difficult to remove yourself from the dream of like, I wanted to create this business, and go to what the reality is, which is the business that you're actually building and the people that actually like using your products. And so my question to you is, how can the aspiring CEO figure out, not like in my dreams, my perfect customer, but who is actually my customer? How do you, when you give the story of Tyler Perry and it's like Southern Christian women, how can I find out who are the Southern Christian women for my business?
Right.
Yeah. That's a weird way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, Colin, you're a young guy, you're still in the dating scene. It's very much like dating, right? If you're only going on dates with one type of individual, how will you know who you are actually born to serve? Not who you can serve, but who you're born to serve. It requires a little bit of dating your ideal client before you get married to them. Even at AppSumo, when we first started out, it was very much targeting the solopreneur. How do we get the solopreneur these incredible deals? But halfway in my tenure as CEO, we analyzed who's actually driving the highest customer lifetime value. And we realized it was actually this secondary customer that we were completely ignoring, the marketing agencies. And we actually called him Marketing Agency Matt. The second we doubled down on Marketing Agency Matt and gave him what he wanted, white label software deals, lifetime software deals, the ability to buy multiple licenses so he can serve the multitude of his clients, the business tripled almost overnight. And so it does require a little bit of that discovery phase, that little bit of, I do need to do a couple plays where no one shows up to really analyze, hey, who actually is showing up for my second date? And that's really how you're going to, the litmus test is, who was I born to serve? Not who I can serve, but who was I born to serve? Who's referring me a ton of business? Who do I love working for? Who wants to keep coming back? what is the market that continues to grow? And then how do I make sure that I continually double down and analyze that particular customer segment in order to keep growing my business? Because if you can do that, Callum, you actually could change nothing else about your business except for who you serve and end up tripling it almost overnight.
I remember Alex Hormozi always talks about like the starving market. You know, the person that like, I don't know, maybe you're like in a car park during the summer and everyone's boiling, and then someone comes around with like a lemonade stand.
Right.
Like the starving market.
Totally, 100%.
One thing that you said that was interesting, like it sparked me the second you said it. Who was I born to serve? And I can just imagine so many people listening to this, and like you would almost ask yourself that question, right? Like, who was I born to serve? I'm curious for you, when you reflect on that, when you think about it, how did you come up with that answer? Because I feel like there's so much that goes into that.
Totally.
Who was I born to serve? How do you come up with the answer?
This is part of your life's purpose. And I go through this exercise with a couple of my clients, with some of my friends, and I ask them to give me 3 to 5 of the proudest moments in their life. And these are moments that you weren't proud because of the way other people looked at you. Oftentimes high achievers, they are striving for the approval of others, but rather, what are the moments where you are most proud that even if no one knew about it, you would still be proud about it? And what you'll notice if you start to write down those 3 to 5 things is there tends to be a pattern. And I try to take that pattern and condense it down to 3 words. I'll give you an example. So for me, I was most proud about when I jumped on the call with Noah. I remember telling him, I'm like, I think AppSumo has a lot of meat left on the bone. And when I remember when I'm hiring people that come from non-traditional backgrounds and being able to coach them up and train them and get them to the next level. When I'm working with some of the CEOs, even for free with AppSumo, I would go and mentor some of the CEOs that were launching on AppSumo and help and getting emails from them or texts from them like, I'm going to name my yacht after AppSumo. Like, this has changed my life. I noticed there was a pattern. And what the pattern was for me was unlocking untapped potential. And when I said, how do I unlock untapped potential for myself? Like, that was my North Star. Everything that I do in my life is, how do I unlock untapped potential? For me, who I was born to serve as CEOs, because number one, I'm uniquely qualified. I've walked that path, so I can give them advice that very few people in the world can. Number two, I think that CEOs change communities. I think they bend the curve of our ecosystem. When CEOs are better, their companies are better. When their companies are better, the employees' families are better. When the employees' families are better, the communities they live in are better. And so when we talk about unlocking the untapped potential of the world, to me, I am uniquely qualified. I'm born for this. And so what I ask for you, Callum, is like, what are the 3 to 5 moments in your life where you have felt the most proud? Things that you would be proud, even if you never told anyone else. And then what is the common thread amongst all of that? And I would spend that time thinking about that, because I think that ends up dictating all of your future decisions. I say this all the time, make one decision that eliminates 1,000 decisions. If you can make this one decision, which is what is your highest calling, what is your true purpose, and then who are you born to serve, it becomes so much easier for you to analyze future business ventures, analyze who you should be working with, analyze how you should be spending your time, and really analyzing how are you spending your life.
You know, I read the book by Peter Thiel, 0 to 1.
Yeah.
And one of the things he talks about, I found it fascinating. One of the things he talks about is being like one of one.
Yeah.
Like if you look at the best companies, the most profitable companies, the best businesses, they're one of one. Like Google's search engine, it's just Google.
Totally.
Apple's hardware and what they've built with the iPhone and the brand that they've built, it's one of one. Nike, their branding, their products, Air Jordan, it's one of one. And the reason I like what you said is, who am I born to serve? It's like you're finding your unique thing. You're using your experiences, and your experiences are unique to you. That's what makes you one of one. And you're tapping into that. And that word experiences. I have this belief that a lot of the things that we most care about, I was listening to an interview with Hassan Minhaj. He called it like the drive shaft, the things that like motivate us, that inspire us. There's there's certain things they'll just immediately light a fire in you. You could be exhausted, burnt out, but if someone can trigger that thing for you, you can go again. And for you, you said unlocking untapped potential. And I want you to go back in your life. Why is that so meaningful to you? Why is that so motivating? Why is that like, I'm born to do this? Like, why does it give you that feeling?
Yeah, I mean, first I'd like to touch a little bit on that monopoly of one. I think that, to me, predicting the future is really about analyzing the current environment and what's happening at a small scale that's going to eventually become the norm. And you take a look at some of the biggest brands in the world today. They're not Apple, they're not Nike, they're Oprah, they're Joe Rogan, they're Tony Robbins. They are unique individual personalities. And it's not that what they're doing is unique, but rather they are unique. And so I truly 100% agree that the more that you can go deeper into who you are, you can, I think the future is no longer a bunch of W-2 employees, but rather everybody working for themselves and creating a monopoly of one. And I think that first starts with deeply understanding who you are. And I think that's part of your origination story. I think that a lot of times where you came from has a direct reflection and a direct tie to your core purpose. And for me, myself, my family was on vacation in Niagara Falls when the first Gulf War started. And for most people, that didn't really matter. But for us, we were living in Kuwait at the time. And so when we went to the airport to go back, we realized that there is a war zone and we can't fly back home. And so we had to stay in Canada with the clothes literally on our back for what we didn't know, an insurmountable amount of time. And we were basically refugees almost overnight. And we went from living an incredible life back in Kuwait to essentially having to go to the church for handouts and clothes and food. And my dad didn't have a permit to work. And so we went from the highest of highs to the lowest of lows in the middle of what should have been a really happy trip. And so seeing my family have to go through that process and recognize the potential that they had, that they were unable to realize that, entering an environment where I didn't speak the language and being able to unlock my own untapped potential, the ability to see and surround myself with people that I hired at AppSumo and knowing that they were passed over for promotions or Ivy League positions when, quite frankly, they could have run circles around those individuals. When I see all of those individuals, that shows a gap between the capability of humanity and where we are today. And if I can insert myself and somehow close the gap in any way, I'll know I've done my job in the world.
Wow, that's powerful. That is very powerful. I can't imagine that feeling of going, like you go on this vacation, and even what you said, it's like it's meant to be this happy time, but then things just transform, and like the uncertainty, the anxiety. Can you just take us back to that moment? What was because obviously you were a lot younger then as well.
Yeah.
And I think when you're younger, things also hit you deeper.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're not even cognizant of it in the moment that it's happening. Sometimes it only becomes clear in hindsight. What was the emotion for you at that time when you realized that was the reality?
Yeah, I mean, I wish it was 2 weeks. I wish it was just a handful of months, but this was a period of years. This is a period of years where my dad couldn't work, where we were trying to find where we could go and eventually getting a work visa in the United States. But for me, it was a lot of uncertainty, from a financial standpoint, from where do I fit in standpoint, going to schools where I was the outsider. I didn't speak English, that I just didn't feel like I had belonged at that moment in time, knowing that we were moving place to place and there was never really any solid ground. So it was definitely a very transformative time. And it was to me, it's something that I still work on, is trying to figure out, how do I overcome some of those past traumas and some of those past wounds? And how do I make sure that those old patterns aren't inserting themselves into my day-to-day relationships, my day-to-day work, But I think all of us, we all have gone through very transformative moments as children. I tell CEOs all the time that be careful that the culture of your company is not a reflection of your childhood. And this happens a lot, where the core values and the way that they operate is a direct reflection of how they grew up. And that may be optimal. It may be what got you to 7 figures, but is it really what's going to get you to 8 figures, to 9 figures and beyond? And if not, we need to unpack your psychology first and foremost before we're ever going to break through to the next plateau.
Yeah. It's really powerful how much of like, I had never thought about it in the business sense of like, make sure your company doesn't become a reflection of your childhood. But definitely in a personal sense. And I remember even having this conversation with my mum, which is like, it's crazy how things that happen in those initial stages of your life that 30, 40, 50 years, 60 years down the line, it's still with someone, and it still has, it's like an instruction manual into like how they behave.
Totally.
It's crazy that these initial moments can have that sort of impact. I'm curious for you, what do you think is the impact today of your childhood?
Humans are really unique in that we don't finish developing in the womb. For the first 5, 6 years, our brain still has a ton of neuroplasticity, and it's still very much developing. And if we're thinking of ourselves like a computer, our hardware is still being very much created in real time. So the experiences that you have, the relationships you have with your parents, the software that you are installing on your hard drive. And so that is the computer. When you're 5, 6, I mean, for many people say it's into your 20s and your 30s where your hardware and software is finally complete. And so being mindful of, hey, how am I rewired? Do I need a software update? What is serving me and what's not? And in many ways, your own psychology, Callum, is very much serving you, but in many ways, it might be holding you back. And so, meeting with therapists, meeting with coaches, I have a multitude of them, and analyzing like, in what ways is this serving me, and in what ways is this holding me back? In what ways am I being over conservative because I'm chasing that solid ground that I didn't have as a kid, right? Am I? And I want to commend you. You've made a lot of very brave decisions to jump off and do things on your own. Now at 25, those are things that, quite frankly, I wouldn't have had the courage to do at 25 because I was chasing the safe route. Let me go work at Microsoft because no matter what, I'll have that on my resume. And so that'll be a good parachute to fall back on. I would have never had the courage to go jump off and do things on my own. And so maybe that was the right call, or maybe that was just my own psychology when I was younger, sort of rearing its ugly head as I got older. And that's really where you need to analyze. Am I making a decision based on logic, or am I making it based on emotion? And there's an old saying, your mouth is 3 inches below your nose, but you need someone else to tell you if you have bad breath. And so having an outside counsel, people that you can trust, is really important to make sure that you're not making decisions based on old patterns, but rather making decisions that are the best for the Callum of the future.
You know what's interesting, and it's something that I tell myself, which is, I think especially over the long term, I think very few things happen by accident. Like, and the reason I say that is in support of what you said, which is like, there's a reason you're getting the outcomes that you're getting, good and bad.
Totally.
And a lot of the time, it does go back to just that inner wiring, the things that you're not even cognizant of how you act and how you respond in certain situations, but it's dictating your outcomes. And so I think that that level of introspection, the therapy, sometimes it's interesting how you learn things about yourself. I think that's actually an important thing as well, is I realized even with myself, like I learned through conversation.
Yeah.
So it was about like, even when I went the therapy route, it wasn't so much what she was saying. It was just the act of talking about something, and like that two-way street. Totally. It was helping me pick things up and put the patterns and put things together, stitch everything together. I'm curious for you, like, as you've, I always love the quote or the phrase that like, what got you from A to B won't get you from B to C. You have to constantly reinvent if you want to keep ascending and excelling, what habits, behaviors in your life have allowed you to reinvent yourself?
Yeah. I think it's phenomenal that you've learned that the way you learn is through conversation. I think that that's actually one of the critical skills that people need to understand about themselves, is that everyone's hardware and software is wired differently in terms of the patterns to learning. And I think step one is learning how you learn. So if you can learn how you learn, whether that's through conversation, my wife, she learns through journaling. So she learns through writing. I know some people are auditory. They need to listen through audiobooks. I know other people are very visual and like they like to learn via YouTube and courses. Understanding how you learn is really critical. And I would say from a habit of how do you continuously level up? If you can get really good, if you can learn how you learn anything. And I would say where you are and between where you are and where you want to be is simply a function of the skills gap. You could become exactly who you need to become if you were able to ascertain all of the skills you needed in order to close that gap. One of my favorite quotes, Callum, is my favorite definition of hell is on your last day on earth, the person you became meets the person you could have become. So imagine that on your last day on earth, you get to shake hands with who you could have become. Like that's the ultimate hell. And so how do you close the gap between who that individual could be and who you are today is a direct reflection of your learning. For me, I think one of the key cornerstone habits that I've maintained is my love for reading. I developed that from my dad. We used to go to libraries as a kid. And to this day, I start every morning with a cup of coffee and a book. And I make sure that, to me, I treat books like prescription drugs, AKA what is my ailment today? What am I trying to learn today? What are the problems that I'm dealing with today? And the great thing is that we've had hundreds of years of publications. None of our problems are unique. Most likely there's someone out there that's written a book that'll at least be directionally accurate to give you a starting point of how to solve that problem. So if I'm dealing with a psychology issue, or if I'm dealing with a relationship issue, or I'm dealing with a hiring issue, there's a book out there that will at least point me in the right direction to make sure that I'm not spinning circles. So one of my key cornerstone habits is reading. The next one is planning. I keep my journal with me almost every single day. To me, I maintain a quarterly goal that breaks down into a weekly goal, that breaks down into the 3 things I need to accomplish that particular day. So my quarterly goal is aligned to my North Star. My weekly goal is aligned to how do I make progress on my quarterly goal. And then my day, I'm trying to just chip away, even 20, 30 minutes per day. Massive. I've built 6-figure businesses with 20 minutes a day. So if you can just show up every single day, and planning is a big function of that, I think you can make massive progress. And then the last one is, I think, exercise. I think it's super important that you are maintaining a fit body. You know, we live in New York, so you don't really drive much, but most people, they replace their car every 3 to 4 years. You get one body for the rest of your life. So if you had a car, how well would you treat it if you knew that this is the only car you get for the rest of your life? You'd probably treat it a lot better than the way we're all treating ours today. Probably use the most premium fuels, most premium oils, recognizing like, look, this thing might break down at 60 or 70 or 80. And so making sure you're showing up and exercising. And that includes stretching and yoga, because that's often what stiffens up the most as we enter the 40s and 50s. So I think those are the big 3, and just figuring out how are you learning and making sure you're doubling down, making sure you're planning and being proactive with your day. And then lastly is making sure that exercise, because I think health is the foundation for wealth. And I think those 2 are the foundation for happiness.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting as I listening to you speak. You're such a structured thinker. There's like a clear line of thinking. It's actually interesting for someone like me to follow it, because I think I'm structured in some sense, and I do have a structure that I work off, but it's also very much like the feeling for me. I think it's why I like this, and I like doing this in person, because there's a certain feeling in the room. There's a certain energy that you can detect. Being a structured thinker, where did it start for you?
There's an old adage that says, you don't write for others, you write for yourself. And I think that that's very true. I think that For most of my life, I was winging it because I did a lot of reading. But it
Mm.
really wasn't until I started adding scaffolding, really a bookshelf for my writing, that everything changed. And I'll give you an example. For me, I used to read a multitude of business books. And the issue is when you're a CEO and you're reading all of these business books, you don't know the order of operations. You're essentially assembling all of the ingredients, but you don't have the recipe. So imagine a baker. She's got all of the ingredients on her countertop, but she doesn't know, do I do flour first or eggs first? How do I bake this cake? If you don't know the right order of operations, everything's going to fall apart. You're going to end up with a mess rather than with a dog. I think Tony Robbins says this, dog bit man, man bit dog. Exact same ingredients, very different order, very different story,
Yeah.
right? And so what you have to do is first create the scaffolding for yourself. For me, I recognize that there was really 3 phases of any business. There's the startup, where it's all about product creation. Then there's the scale up, which is all about company creation. And then there's grow up, which is really about legacy creation. So I was then able to go, well, where does hiring fit in? Is that in the startup? No, you're not you're not needing to hire in the startup phase because you're looking for product market fit. You hire in the scale up phase. So I was able to slot that hiring book on that particular bookshelf. And I think that once I've learned that, where I have to create scaffolding for my thoughts, it became much easier to slot things in and create a structured order of thinking. And it's completely transformed the way I learn, the way I take knowledge and slot it in my brain, the way that I'm able to then teach it to the CEOs that I work with and the people that I hire in a way that makes it much easier for them to go, hey, is this a startup thing or is this a scale up thing?
You know what's interesting? I actually, the end of every week, I'll do like a voice memo. It's like my form of journaling. So I'm someone, I like to speak. So rather than writing it down, I'll just get my iPhone out and I'll like speak into my phone for like 12, 15 minutes every Sunday. And it's just the way I just want to unpack my mind. And one of the things that I said, I usually boil it down. I'm like, one idea, one thought that I just want to carry through this week with like what I need to achieve. And the thing that came to me, I was like, do what the moment requires. And the reason I loved that and it resonated is it understands the importance of timing. Sometimes you can do something and the reason it didn't work isn't because of what you did. The timing was wrong. And a lot of what I've learned in life and something that's really helped me, it helps me do this podcast, is being present. And the reason I love being present is because I feel like when you're present, you understand timing. You're doing things in the right time. And I think the thing that stuck out to me about what you're saying, it understands timing. It understands order of operations. This is how things need to happen. I feel like so often, even on social media, you'll hear CEOs, founders talk about the importance of hiring, the importance of culture. And yes, it is important, but it's important at a certain time.
Totally.
And you need to figure out what is important for you at the time that you're in. Do what the moment requires. Here's where I want to go. You mentioned, so I'm 25, and you mentioned that when you were 25, you didn't have like, you said you didn't have the courage to kind of do like something out on your own or like take those sort of bold moves, those bold risks. Take us back to Ayman at 25. Like, what were you doing? Who are you?
Yeah. I mean, at 25, I was finishing up my tail end of my career at Microsoft, trying to figure out what was I going to do next. And I recognized that I had learned an old adage, which is your 20s are for learning, your 30s are for earning. And I asked myself, well, what do I want to learn next? And there's 2 schools of thought when you're thinking about learning. You can either double down on your skills, which I think most people should, but then you can also ask yourself, well, what's holding you back from who you could become? And for me, I recognized that what was holding me back was marketing. And so I asked myself, where can I learn marketing? Who's the best in the world at marketing? How do I go deep? Because all of the businesses that I'd created prior to joining Microsoft, they all stalled out at the same revenue milestones. So I'd go and start another company and it would stall out at the same revenue milestone. And then I'd start a third company, it would still stall out at the same revenue milestone. And I'm like, maybe it's not the company, maybe it's me. And it was me. It was me recognizing that I didn't know what it took to get to the next level. And I think Hormozi said this, super eloquently. I'm always jealous of how eloquently he can say things. He's like, you can take a business to 6 figures by just selling something to somebody. And if you want to get to 7 figures, sell something to somebody consistently. But really, that consistently is about scale. It's about marketing. It's about how do you take what you're selling and do so at scale. And I didn't know that level. And so when I was analyzing and when I was recognizing, I was like, I could go back and start my own thing. I could leave Microsoft, start my own business, but I'm going to keep playing the same movie over and over again. I'm going to keep running into that same bottleneck. And so instead, I need to ask myself, how do I become the best in the world at the things that are holding me back, at least the best in the world for myself, from the things that are holding me back in order to break through that next plateau?
That is powerful. I think it's funny that you say that, because I think I've definitely had the same thought. And like, there's different levels to marketing. And I think sometimes people confuse marketing with sales.
Yeah.
Actually, why don't we dive into that? I remember even hearing a debate and they were talking about what's more important for a business, marketing or sales. Can you just start by defining, like, what would you say is even the difference between marketing and sales? And then where do you kind of land on, like, if one is more important than the other, like, what's your thinking on that?
I guess I'm curious, what do you think marketing is?
Oh, it's a difficult question,
Yeah.
isn't it? I think there's so many things that go into it. I think a lot of it even goes into what you said at the beginning. It's like understanding who you're serving. And then I think it's understanding who you're serving, what you can offer, and then you're able to position your offering so that the person that you want to serve is drawn to it.
That's right.
Rather than you having to like constantly hit them up and like, I don't know, you're constantly following up. That feels more like sales to me, like when you're doing the constant legwork of like trying to get in front of them. Whereas marketing, it feels like it has more of an organic nature to it. It's like you're putting something out there and the people that are meant to be drawn to it are drawn to it.
I define marketing as getting people to want to do business with you. Full stop. If you can get people to want to do business with you, sales becomes unnecessary. So if marketing does its job, you don't need a sales team. You don't need to do sales. You'll have individuals lined up around the corner, ready to hit the buy button, ready to whip out their credit card, right? Your job is find the quacking ducks in the park and feed them, and marketing's job is everything related to how do you convince that starving market to want to do business with you over the multitude of your competitors. And that's a function of multitude of things. How do you speak to the benefits? How do you deeply understand their problems? How are you overcoming their objections? How are you doing so in real time from a marketing standpoint, rather than needing to do it via sales, via jumping on a call, via jumping on a Zoom, and convincing them that your solution is better than everything else? I say this all the time. If marketing does its job, sales becomes unnecessary.
Yeah, that is powerful. And even what you said, marketing is getting people to want to do business with you. That is literally, I can't think of a more powerful business skill set than that. Yeah. That's like incredible to have, right?
100%.
Like they want to do business with you. Even the dynamic is so perfect.
Totally.
It's exactly the right dynamic. Who would you say are the best in the world at doing that? Or in history, who do you look at?
In history, I think you'd have to say Jesus was one of the best marketers of all time, right? 2,000 years later, we have one of the greatest, we have more followers of Christianity than any other religion. People are willing to die for the mission, die for the message. And I think when you look at what is marketing, it's getting people to want to do business with you. I think he did a phenomenal job of understanding what are the problems that most of humanity is dealing with. Whether you believe in God or not, there was a deep message there that resonated with a lot of people. and is the reason people are carving out Sunday mornings in order to dedicate to that message. I think the United States, the forefathers, were phenomenal marketers. You know, you have people from all over the world doing whatever they can to come and live the American dream, including you and me, right? So I think the United States is phenomenal. I think the greatest brand in the world is the U.S. dollar. And what is brand but trust, right? Is the ability to take $100 bill to Thailand, to Japan, to South Africa, and still exchange it for goods and services. Like, that's the power of brand, is the ability to trust. And obviously the last few years, the dollar has been tarnished. And so what does that tell you about brand, right? People are losing trust in the dollar. That's why people trust Apple. They know what they're going to get. They're going to get an incredible experience. So when you look at these incredible marketers, the Steve Jobs of the world, what have they done but position their company in order to overcome the obstacles, overcome the issues that their ideal target market has, in a way that goes, I want what they have because that's going to solve my problem. That's the key. The problem, not the product, the problem. If you deeply understand your ideal client's problem, it can evolve over time in a way that serves them over generations. And I'll give you an example. Steve Jobs, he killed the iPod, the bestseller, the thing that actually put Apple on the map to launch the iPhone. Why? Because he saw BlackBerry swooping in and realizing that people were now saving their MP3s on their phone. And so he goes, I need to cannibalize myself, or BlackBerry's going to do it for me. What was he doing? He was chasing the problem. He wasn't chasing the product. Any other CEO, any other great marketer would have just been like, how do we make the iPod better? Steve Jobs said, how do we kill the iPod with what's the future?
Yeah, that's amazing. What are the actionable things that someone could do to deeply understand a problem? Because that's what you said, right? You said it's more important actually to deeply understand the problem than even the product you're providing.
Yeah.
So what can someone do to deeply understand the problem of their customer?
If you are married to your customer and you don't know their problems, then you're not being a good steward of that relationship. It starts with first deeply understanding, who are you married to? Who are you born to serve? If you if you have a relationship with that individual, you're having multiple coffees with them, you're having calls with them, you understand what are their pain points, what keeps them up at night, where are they losing sleep over, what stresses them out. You know their problems better than they do. You can anticipate it better than they do. It's all about first dedicating yourself to that individual. If you go, this is the problem today, here's how to solve it, and this is going to be your problem next month, and I'm already thinking about the solution for you, and here's your problem 5 years from now, don't worry, we have an R&D department that's already crafting something that's going to, I mean, they're never going to leave you. You have a marriage for life. And so how do you deeply understand your problem? You have to first deeply understand who you serve. I would say it's not about how do you understand the problem. I think the harder problem is understanding who you serve. Once you can actually name who you serve, who you're born to serve, the rest becomes so much easier. You understand strategy, your marketing becomes easier, everything comes easier. One of the exercises that I do with the CEOs is like a 2x2 matrix, which is what are your current fears? Like, what are your stresses? And like being able to ask your CEOs what stresses you out, what keeps you up at night, then goes into, well, then what is the long-term ramifications of those fears? So for my CEOs, my worry is that I don't have enough sales. And well, what is the long-term ramifications of not enough sales? Well, then my business will go out of business and I will be forced to go back and work. So then from a marketing standpoint, how do you flip that and go, well, what would be the solution to not enough sales? More sales than you know what to do with. So instead of you pitching about, hey, we can do PPC and SEO, you say, I'll bring you more customers than you know what to do with. How you do it is irrelevant. What you're speaking to is the problem, and the problem is the fear, and the fear is mapped to the long-term fears that the individual has is what's going to happen with what's stressing me out today if it keeps running its course. And so if you understand that triad, it becomes really easy for you to know who you serve, understand how you can market to them, and more importantly, come up with solutions that overcomes the things that are keeping them up at night.
gonna have to go back and watch that. That was a really good breakdown. When I was listening to you, there was a word that came up in my mind, and it was investment. Being invested. One of the guests that we got on the podcast a few weeks ago was Zach Pogrub, and he's built this huge following on Instagram. He just passed 1 million followers. Shout out to him. And the one word he always uses, obsession.
Yep.
Being obsessed. And when I think about obsession, it's something that you care about deeply. And I kind of have this belief that a lot of the times when you look at the people that were the most successful, they also just cared the most. Like there's I think so often we think about like, how do you differentiate yourself? I even hear debates online about how do you be the top 0.001% or whatever. Like there's these different things. I think you can really just separate yourself by just caring. And when you care a lot, you're going to make the extra efforts. I think about a lot of things in like sports analogies, basketball analogies. And there's the best teams usually have a player that they're not the most talented, but they just make the extra effort. They grab the extra rebound, defensive rebound, offensive rebound. They box out. They just do the little things and they just care a bit more than everyone else. I think it's a big differentiator. And when you talk about deeply understanding your customers' problems, when you're just invested and you care, you will naturally do the work to understand the finer details. The details where you have to kind of dig beneath the surface to really understand it. And if you can kind of put that together, you're just going to have such a deep understanding. It's going to be difficult to compete. It's going to be difficult to compete with you because you can't fake caring. Someone can't just look, oh, he has a great business. I want to just replicate what he has. You can try, but you don't have the care that I have for it. And that's why it's powerful. What would you say it is that you just care deeply about? What are you obsessed about?
This goes back to our conversation earlier, just about unlocking untapped potential. I think that the last few years is a great example of CEOs and founders chasing trends, right? Everyone's chasing crypto and then NFTs and now AI. And the issue that you have is that trends will always change. If you don't deeply care about the technology, if you don't deeply care about how this is going to impact, if it's not aligned with your core purpose, then the trend is going to fade and you're going to lose interest, because if you're just chasing the riches, then it's going to fade. I guarantee you there's going to be billionaires in the crypto space even beyond now, even though it's sort of fallen out of favor, but if only because you deeply care about it. So to me, I think that when you deeply understand your unique purpose in life, for me, unlocking untapped potential, and then you're able to map it to then who were you born to serve? And for me, it's CEOs of 7 and 8 figure companies. And what are you uniquely qualified in order to help them? For me, it's helping them scale their business without burning out. All of those things come together in a way where you're like, I would do this for free. I was born to do this. Like when I wake up and I'm reading books and I'm learning because I'm trying to help them more. To your point, who can compete with passion? If this is stuff that you'd be willing to do for free, if you're wanting to jump into CEO coaching because you think it's lucrative or you think it's prestigious, to me, this is stuff that I would do if I could never tell anyone about it. And I think that what everyone needs to do is figure out what is the thing that you are born to do? What is the thing that you're uniquely qualified to do? And what's the thing that you would do even if no one would ever find out about it, and dedicate your life to becoming world-class at that. And I think the more that, to your point, the Kobe's of the world, where they're pulling, the Shaqs and be like, we need to practice. We need to get these rings. That you can't fake that. You could fake it for 6 months. You could fake it for a year, but to fake it for a decade, to fake it for a lifetime, that's impossible. And I think that the more that you can align your true core purpose with who you serve and the passions that you have, that's how you create an unstoppable monster.
Yeah. There's a quote, everything comes out in the wash, which is like, and it's exactly what you say, where it's certain things just can't be faked. Everything comes out in the wash. Over the long term, it's like the true character, what you really care about, it's just gonna show. And I don't know, things go through different cycles, right?
Mhm.
And I think when you truly care about something, you're just able to be more sticky. You're able to, things just stay because that is consistent. It doesn't matter if crypto is in a bull cycle or like it's bearish and everyone is kind of leaving the space. Like, this is what you care about. This is what you are born to do. And I think what you said is it's such a powerful realization when you're doing something and you're like, I genuinely don't need any profit motive.
Mm-mm.
I would do this for free. Like, it's I'll watch interviews of like basketball players, and when you listen to LeBron talk about basketball, you realize like why he's like one of the greatest to ever do it.
Yeah.
Because he would do it for free.
Yeah.
It's just like a bonus that it's got this huge audience and there's a huge business and like all this money behind it. But if it was just he had to be in the YMCA with his boys, just playing
Totally.
pickup, he would do that and it would be the exact same joy. And it's a big part of the reason why he's able to do it for 20 years.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you keep being the best for 20 years?
Totally.
Don't you just get sick of the injuries, like the constant injuries, having to rehab, come back? He just loves the game. Okay. I want to go back to, so you're working at Microsoft. I want to start talking about the AppSumo days. You're working at Microsoft. You want something that's stable. I know a lot of people that go to those jobs and work for those companies. There's the security benefit. There's also the benefit of just working at such a respected name and the reputation and everything that it brings to work at a company like Microsoft. What made you make the jump and leave all of that to pursue something different?
One of the mottos that I have in life is go towards that which scares but excites you. And I think that anytime you are analyzing the decisions that you've been putting off, the things that keep coming up, you're like, I should do this. I should do this. That whisper in your head, Colin, those are the things that you 100% should craft a life that makes you take the leap. I guarantee you've been thinking about making the leap and doing your own thing for years.
Yeah.
And so I commend you for going towards that, which probably scared you. I mean, that's not an easy decision, right? You're like, how do I get enough savings and how do I make sure that I've got enough finances in place in order to keep this dream alive? And, you know, when I left Microsoft for AppSumo, everybody thought I was crazy. All of my coworkers thought I was crazy. My parents thought I was crazy. I'm giving up a very stable, prestigious position. You know, people at Microsoft, they worked there their entire life. They retire there. It's very common to see people there 20, 30 years. But I use the corner office test as an example, where you sit on the floor and you look at the corner office and you ask, who's sitting there? Do I envy her life? Do I envy his life? And if not, then you may be in the wrong building. And what I recognize was like, this is not the building that I need to be in long term right now. And where do I want to? And to me, the corner office that I was looking for was the corner office of entrepreneurship, the corner office of running my own business, corner office of being a CEO of a company and making decisions and realizing that making another deck that may never see the light of day and having zero impact on whether or not I show up to Microsoft or not on the bottom line, to me just didn't align with my core value of learning and actually having an impact. So when I made the leap to go work for AppSumo, it was night and day. Everything, if I didn't show up, the bills didn't get paid. You know, like if I didn't close this deal, the lights are off. So you go from a place in Microsoft where you could literally hide and still get a W-2, still get your paycheck, to if we don't make this month's numbers, like there may not be an AppSumo. It was a completely different, you know, you're entering a completely different arena. But that scared me, but also excited me. And I also recognize this is what I would need to do in order to learn the skills needed in order to eventually go off and do things on my own.
Yeah. I love that. I think that's almost like, I wonder if it's almost a personality. in the sense of I feel it now that I'm like doing my own path and more entrepreneurial. And since I left my job, it's really like the ultimate, it's just responsibility. It's like you really have to embrace the responsibility. And the way that I even think about my days is different. I think when you're working a normal job, usually you just have a set of tasks, and I don't know, like you have responsibility, but it's limited to a certain degree. It doesn't start and end with you.
No.
It's not like if you don't do it, then the business is going to stop. Well, at least if you're in a good company.
Yeah. I hope not.
Yeah. Hopefully not. But now, like, doing my own thing, it's just, I remember Jocko Willink, he's like a Navy SEAL guy, Army guy. He said, I saw a clip when he said, the night before, write down what you need to do the next day. If you do what you said you needed to do the next day, it's a good day. That's the only measuring stick. That's the only benchmark. And I feel what he means, because taking the path, and I'm sure you felt this as well during your time at AppSumo and even now, it's not about really like how hard you worked or like how many hours was I working. It's just, did I get the things done that I needed to get done? It's a different level of responsibility. And so what I want to ask you about is, even with AppSumo, like, what was it like embracing that responsibility in the beginning? What was it like feeling like, okay, this kind of, it starts with me? Obviously, you're part of an organization and there's different people, but I think when you're the CEO, it's like, it starts with me. What was that experience like?
Yeah, I mean, I want to commend you first, Callum, because you taking that leap. There's a great analogy where like a lion in a zoo gets fed every day, gets health care, and is always safe. Whereas the lion in the wild has to find its own food. If it gets injured, it's on its own, but it's free. And so the question that you had to ask yourself was, do I want to be safe or do I want dangerous freedom? And for you to have made that leap to chase that dangerous freedom, I think it's something that a lot of people aspire for, which is just, I'd rather be a lion in the wild than a lion at the zoo. And so recognizing that was, I think, is really important. The great news for me at AppSumo was I had incredible people working there. I had Noah and Anton. Anton took me under his wing. He was the one running AppSumo before me. And being able to go, here's the playbook. Here's how we are closing deals, how we identify incredible products, how we write copy, the AppSumo way. Getting to the point where eventually I was, closing deals on Monday, writing copy on Tuesday, sending the email on Wednesday, doing customer support on Thursday, sourcing deals on Friday, and rinsing and repeating. So the ability to, go into those early days where my job was keep the lights on, because at that time, the profits from AppSumo were funneling. I don't know if you remember SumoMe, which became Sumo.com. The profits from AppSumo were funding Sumo.com. So it was my responsibility to keep the lights on, make enough profit. There was a certain profit target in order to make sure the bills are paid and that Sumo can get off the ground and eventually be self-sustaining. That was a lot of pressure, but it's something that I think for certain individuals, they thrive on that pressure. To me, I love knowing that if I don't close this deal on Monday, there's no email going out tomorrow. And if there's no email going out, there's no revenue. And if there's no revenue, there's no bills getting paid. So to me, there's certain individuals, myself included, that thrive on that pressure and recognize, like, what do I need to do in order to make sure that we're hitting this month's numbers, in order to make sure the bills are paid, in order to make sure that, that the business can keep going, and eventually getting to the point where we're building enough margin into the business where we're no longer worrying about making this month's numbers, but rather how are we investing these extra profits for further growth?
I think it's like something that I think is so interesting is the individual that thrives under the pressure of that. Like, if you could boil it down to a few characteristics, because I feel it now. Like, I feel the shift, and it's interesting. I think there's a quote: "The most addictive thing in life is a salary." is every 2 weeks, I know this paycheck is hitting my account. And let me tell you, I'm speaking from first experience, from first-hand experience now. When that salary is removed, you understand, I truly understand at this point why it's so difficult for people to leave their jobs or their, even if there's something inspiring them that they want to drive towards that. I love what you said about the corner office test. Like if there's that corner office they have in their mind, the addictiveness of the salary. And the reason why is because it's comfort, it's certainty, it's this is gonna be here. And I think as humans and just in general, there's something very comforting about certainty. And so I want to juxtapose that to the individual. I guess this is kind of what we've done, which is almost you've just gone full force towards the uncertainty. And now you're in a moment, and, you know, I really want to describe the feeling to the audience because the time pressure, the pressure of knowing that I need to be able to deliver this by then. But to be honest, there's a lot of factors that go into you being able to deliver it. You could be the best salesperson with the best idea in the world. That does not guarantee that you're going to be able to close that deal between Monday and Friday. You don't even get to determine when that timing is going to happen.
Totally.
And I think that's one of the things that like I have to stay very calm to now is understanding that I can put in 5 out of 5, 10 out of 10 performances every day and it still might not get done.
Yeah.
And if it didn't get done, then you didn't succeed in what you were trying to do. It's really that objective, like it's really that harsh. And so what I want to understand from you was, first of all, how did you make that learning curve where you said, you know, Anton, he kind of showed me the playbook and I was learning sales. Like, how did you go through that learning curve? Number one. And then number two, how did you get adept at just handling the pressure of it all and being able to thrive under that pressure and be poised, be calm, be composed? How did you deal with that?
There's a great saying that says, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I think that if you stack all of the pressure on yourself right from the get-go, you're going to crush under that pressure. I think the world's best athletes in the world, the world's best anything in the world, do a really good job of compartmentalizing pressure and go, what is the one thing that I can control right now, right? I may not be able to control everything on the P&L. I may not be able to control every deal that gets closed, but what I can control is the 20 minutes prior to a sales call to prepare, to go through my notes, to make sure that I overcome the potential objections. That's what I can control. And so if I can compartmentalize of what's the thing right in front of me that I can control and rack up some small wins, eat that elephant one bite at a time, right? How do you move a mountain? One pebble at a time. How do I focus on this single pebble? I'm not going to worry about the mountain because if I look at the mountain, it's going to overwhelm me and I'm going to crumble under that pressure. But what I can do is I can pick up this one pebble and I can place it over here perfectly. If I focus on this one pebble at a time, that's going to build a momentum. I did this one pebble. I was able to do this one close. I was able to close this particular deal. Now I'm able to write this copy. Now I'm able to go and source the next deal. Now I'm able to write this email. I'm able to build this momentum over time in order to develop confidence. I tell confidence is your self-esteem that you have with yourself. Sorry, the inverse. Self-esteem is the reputation you have with yourself. So self-esteem is the reputation you have yourself, and the reputation you have with yourself is a direct reflection of the history that you know. Like, did you wake up on time this morning? Did you go to the gym? Did you do what you said you were? You talk about Jocko writing those big 3 tasks. Did you do those big 3 tasks? If you didn't, you keep breaking promises with yourself, that confidence is going to be tarnished. You don't go to the gym and immediately put up 2 plates on the bench, right? You start with a bar, you add 5 pounds. You keep building up over time. And I think the best in the world at anything when it comes to handling pressure is the ability to rack up those wins over time. The Olympic gold medalists don't show up at the Olympics every 4 years and perform for the first time. They have nationals, they have regionals, they are racking up wins all along the way leading to the Olympics.
Mm.
And so what you need to do is ask yourself, how am I racking up my Olympics, right? For you, what is my Olympics?
Mm.
How am I preparing myself for that grand stage? So that way, when I'm ready to stand on that podium, I know I earned that gold medal.
Mm.
And so being able to break that down and move that move that mountain one pebble at a time, I think is really critical for you to develop that confidence over the course of your entire career.
Mm. Yeah, it's great. I love that quote. How do you eat an elephant one bite at a time? And it reminds me, I remember watching a documentary, listening to interviews, listening to clips of the Super Bowl when the Patriots played the Falcons.
Mm.
And the Falcons are up, I think it was 27-3. And they're talking to Brady about it. In hindsight, they're like, how do you get back that? How do you recover that? And you have to think about the emotions at the time, right? Like you're the Patriots. It's the Super Bowl. It's one of the biggest sporting events in the world. Everyone's watching. Your family's flying in. Sponsors. Just the pressure of your own expectation. Showing up for those 16 games in the regular season. Playing those playoff games. And you go through the first half or the first 3 quarters. You're down 27-3. You're like, this is hell.
Right.
Like everything has gone wrong in this moment. And they talk to the players, the Patriots players afterwards, and they speak to Brady and they're like, how did you even think about, like, how did you do it? Like, how did you take that lead back? And he's like, man, I wasn't even thinking about like taking the lead back. Like I wasn't thinking about tying or whatever. I was just thinking we're getting our ass kicked. How do we just stop getting our ass kicked for the fun?
Yeah.
Like, how do we start there? How do we get a score? And then for the defense, how do we just get a stop? How do we get a 3 and out? And you start to stack these series over and over.
Mm-hmm.
The offense scores, defense 3 and out, or defense field goal. You start to stack it up. And very quickly, what becomes an insurmountable lead is right there. And it speaks to exactly what you're saying. And I think it's actually a very powerful analogy, which is just like, how do I take this stone from over here? How do I take this brick from over here?
Mm-hmm. And
how do I just place this one brick as perfectly as you can place it? That is the only focus. Will Smith gives this story of when he was a child and his dad wanted him to like build a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, I was so frustrated. It was me and my brother trying to build this wall. We cannot figure out how to build this wall. And he's like, I'm so frustrated. He says, my dad just pulls me to the side and he says, stop trying to figure out how to build the wall. Just think about how you take one brick and place it as perfectly as possible. And if you do that enough times, you will have a wall. I wanna go. Obviously, when you build the wall, when you build the business, when Brady wins the Super Bowl, it's a beautiful moment, and it's a beautiful moment because it's the culmination of all of these small moments, all of these individual bricks. That's the beauty. There's also, I think, in any journey, there's also like a darkness to it.
Mm-hmm.
There's deeply uncomfortable moments. There's moments of doubt, moments of fear. And so when you were at AppSumo and you're building this business and you're generating revenue, and that revenue is like, okay, that's going directly into this. I'm keeping the lights on. I'm keeping everything running. And obviously we've seen what it's become and what you guys have built. But what were the dark moments? What were the moments when you were 27-3 down, when you couldn't figure out how to build the wall? Take me to those moments. Break that down for me.
I loved what you said about Brady, Colin, where you're like, he was down 27-3 and it's fourth quarter. He's like, what am I going to do? And I don't think that Belichick gets enough credit, because without Belichick, I think Brady is bagging groceries somewhere. He was 6th round pick, riding the bench. And I think that Belichick was a master at, let's just run this route. do your job. What's the next play? He does a great, I think before one of Brady's first Super Bowls, he actually took the entire team and he laid out a 2x4 on the ground. And he's like, I want everyone to walk across this 2x4 and balance across it. And they're like, come on, coach. It's like, we're world-class athletes. What do you mean we're going to balance on this beam? He's like, just do it. So we had the entire team walk across this beam. And, some people fell off, but most people were able to make it across. And eventually, after a couple of reps, everyone was able to get across, no problem. So he's like, if I were to take this same exact beam and put it 40 stories high, nothing's changed except what's in your mind. Every one of you has been able to cross this beam without a second thought. You jumped right on across the beam and you walked across it. But what I've done is changed everything else about this scenario. We're about to enter this Super Bowl. It's like every other game. Nothing has changed except for everything else around the game. So the ability to compartmentalize, bring things back down to this particular moment and go, how do we cross this beam as good at 10 stories up, as good as if it was on the ground, is how we can keep our focus and keep our psychology focused on the task at hand. Another great story is Andy Stump. He's a Navy SEAL. He was on Joe Rogan podcast, and they were teaching them how to climb big walls. So he's 40, 50 stories up. You drop a pebble, it takes minutes to hit to the ground, and he's freaking out. He's climbing this wall to the point where his leg is scissoring, shaking, and he's freaking out. And he's like, how am I going to, I'm like halfway up this wall. There's no way I can go back down. The only way out of here is up. I'm about to fall off this thing and potentially kill myself. And then all of a sudden, the guy that was training them, like a big wall climber, really like world class, wasn't even roped in, comes over, cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And he's like, hey man, put your hand right there. And Andy zonked out, pulled back in, put his hand right there, got super focused on just this next step, was able to just one step at a time, and eventually was able to become a world-class climber as a Navy SEAL. And these are the best in the world. Even they still succumb to it. And so for that story about Brady, let's forget the score. Let's forget that we're in the fourth quarter. How do we just run this route as perfectly as we can? How do we just focus on that one particular moment? And there's always moments in every career, in every industry, where you feel overwhelmed, where you feel like I am 50 stories up and the only way down is by falling off this wall. That this 2x4 is 20 to 30 stories high. And so for me at AppSumo, the one moment was probably, we had just launched Briefcase. It was one of the fastest growing SaaS companies to 7 figures. We took it to 7 figures in 5 months. It was something that I had really pushed the board to do. I'd pushed the company to do. And I'm like, I think this is the future. I think this is the future of the business. And we had taken this thing out, and for a variety of reasons, a lack of P&L visibility on my end, a lack of P&L education, is 100% my fault. We had overspent on inventory. And I remember chatting with Noah, and we basically got into it. And I realized, holy shit, I might have put AppSumo out of business. And I remember on Thanksgiving Day, practically crying over our P&L when it should have been a great time. We had just had we just had our best year ever. We had just launched Briefcase. And because I didn't deeply understand financial cash flow analysis, I was worried that I had potentially put AppSumo out of business. And so for me, I had spent the entire Black Friday, entire weekend, deeply understanding the numbers, deeply understanding our P&L, and figuring out, how do I get ourselves out of this potential hole? And so that was a moment, that was a dark time for me. That's when I was basically up a wall and feeling like I had just failed the company, failed Noah, failed the team, because I had put the company in danger for something that I thought was going to be the potential future for the business. And luckily we were able to right the ship. We were able to figure things out. We were able to move some things around and eventually get things back on track. But it was definitely a very scary moment for myself, where I felt I had made a critical error in the business's journey.
That's interesting. I feel like things hit us differently, and it's based on, it's probably based on so many different factors, like your personality, your experiences. Even goes back to what we were saying earlier, there's just certain things that you just really care about. And I'm curious, is there there's probably not a more scary uh, blood goes cold moment for a CEO than I might have just put our company out of business.
Mm-hmm.
And so when that thought on that Black Friday, on Thanksgiving, that thought happened in your mind, why did that hit you so deeply?
Mm-hmm.
What was it about that thought? What was it about that realization that you were like fuck?
I tell people all the time, CEOs particularly, you can recover from a bad hire. You can recover from bad strategy. The one thing you can't recover from is running out of cash. So recognizing that we had overinvested in inventory that particular year and made a significant investment, essentially dropping our cash reserves, I was running numbers on how much it was going to cost out of my personal pocket to make payroll. I had just brought a bunch of my friends from Miami to come work at AppSumo. I'd hired a bunch of people that I cared about. And I was like, I need to make sure that they get paid. And so I'm like thinking like, I'm going to have to drain my life savings in order to make sure we're making payroll. So for me, being in that moment where I'm trying to figure out what can we do in order to really keep the lights on, I think was a really scary moment for me. And, luckily we were able to have an incredible Black Friday that sort of saved us, but it was definitely a moment where I had to, number one, get a lot more P&L visibility. I wasn't really deeply analyzing the P&L at the time. Understand our cash flow dynamics. I didn't understand that at the time. It was definitely a leveling up moment for myself as CEO. And it's now one of the main tenets that I work with my CEOs, making sure that they don't just understand their P&L, because oftentimes CEOs, they manage their business through their P&L, and that doesn't mean cash flow. Sometimes CEOs they'll get their P&L and they'll go down. And if it's a positive number, they take a shot. And if it's a negative number, they take two shots. And that's not the way to run a business. So what we need to do is instead analyze how is our P&L impacting cash flow and making sure that we have enough cash reserves in order to make payroll, in order to run a healthy business. Because as long as we have enough cash in the bank, we can recover from that bad strategy. We can recover from that bad hire. It's making sure there's enough gas in the tank in order to make that cross-country trip. And so working with the CEOs and making sure they don't make the same mistakes that I made on my path to 80 million and beyond is one of the things that I get most excited about, is helping them avoid those sleepless nights, those Thanksgiving dinners where they're potentially crying over their P&L.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things I think about whenever I hear a story like that, or whenever even in my own life, you just feel like you made a mistake. A lot of the times what makes a mistake so disastrous is never the mistake itself. It's the panic afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And you see this all the time. You see this even when like high level people will be like convicted of these like crazy crimes. I was even watching like the Bernie Madoff documentary. The thing that made it so bad, what he did, was the cover up. It's the cover up. It's the panic. It's what you do afterwards. And even just speaking with you, one thing that really shines through is like there's a level of poise, there's a level of calm. And it's really something that I try, because sometimes you're just so deeply involved in a problem and you're butting your head up against this thing so much, you're so into it, it's like you're worked up, like you're like agitated. You're like, why can't I get this? Like, why am I not getting the result? And in that moment, the most difficult thing in the world is just to pull yourself a bit out of it and just, I don't know if it's going on a walk or it's just spending time outside or meditating. It's so difficult to just reestablish the calm. And then once you reestablish the calm, then you can kind of get back to the fundamentals. You can get back to what we spoke about, which is like, okay, how do I just lay the next brick correctly?
Mm-hmm.
And even when you're breaking it down, you're like, yeah, we need to like analyze the P&L. We need to figure this out. We need to figure this out. It's back into like, how do we solve it? It's like the panic is gone.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just solve the problem. Let's do the task that it takes to solve the problem. But I want to go just before that moment. I want to go of how do you establish calm in your life? How do you, what habits, routines, mindsets, what is allowing you to stay poised on a daily basis?
I think Nick Huber said, stress is a decision unmade.
Mm.
And I think that anytime you're feeling stress, you're feeling that overwhelm, it's probably related to a decision that you're not making. And so what you need to do is ask yourself, well, what decision am I not making? Analyze, like, what am I optimizing for? What would success look, if I were to wave a magic wand, what would success look like? Like, let me do a quick, if you were to put your fist out real quick, okay, like a little further out. Why are you pushing?
I don't know, it just feels natural.
It just feels natural, right? It feels natural whenever you're butting up against something that's there. It feels natural to just push against it. I never asked you to push against me. You just naturally did it. You're like, what are we fighting over?
Competitive, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. But every time we butt up against the problem, that's the exact same thing that happens. It's a very natural response to just immediately try to push through it, rather than pull back and ask yourself, what am I optimizing for here? What would success look like? What are my different scenarios? 2 options is a dilemma. 3 options, now you're thinking about strategy. And so if you only think there's only one way, that's where stress comes. If you think there's only 2 ways, now you're debating between these 2 options. But if you can start to bring in those mentors, bring in those individuals, people that you trust, trusted advisors, and go, what are my different options here? All of a sudden, you've got a plethora of different options. You can make a more informed, less emotional, more logical decision, and you can have a path forward. You can make that decision. You can eliminate the stress, and you can recognize that this is the best path forward, and you'll probably end up coming away stronger for it. You know, there's a great book, Anti-Fragile, that talks about the best businesses, the best individuals, they thrive from chaos. They don't die from chaos, they thrive from it. It's like going to the gym. I'm going to break down this muscle fiber so it grows back stronger. And so if you as an organization, if you as a CEO are able to analyze and continuously show up and approach stress, not by pushing against it, but rather taking a step back and analyzing what is the best way forward and recognizing this is the only way up this mountain, all of a sudden with each thing you overcome, you end up becoming stronger as a CEO for it. I'm going to ask you, what are some things that maybe stressed you out 5 years ago? If you were to take yourself back.
5 years ago. How old was I 5 years ago? 20. I was in university. What stressed me out? You know what? So like when you say the thing about like untapped potential, that is like my biggest thing. I remember going on a walk with my brother, and we're just very like straight with each other. We're just very honest. And we were speaking about like, what are we optimizing for? Like, what's the one thing that like, when this is all over and it's all said and done, like, what's the one thing I want to be able to say to myself and know that it's true? And what I said to him, I was like, I really just want to like fulfill my potential. I just want to feel like there was something that Kobe said, which was when he retired, they said it like, what are you going to do? Like, all you do is play basketball. Like, what are you going to do? He's like, if you knew the way that I've trained, the hours that I've dedicated to this craft, I've played enough basketball.
Yeah.
I don't need to play any more basketball. And there's something, I think the most fulfilling thing to me would be like the talent that I was given, and not even just the talent, the people that I have around me, my parents, my family, friends, because I think those are a key part of the way I am now, are those people, the experience, the hardships. I want to feel like I got every bit out of that experience that I could, that I maximize the potential, that when I look at it, I'm like, that guy, he left it all out there. Like it was done. Like he pushed everything to as far as it could go. And so I think 5 years ago, I think the thing that caused stress for me, I was just, and I'm still like this to a certain degree now, just impatient. Just like, I see my, it sounds weird, but I just see my potential and I want it like right fucking now.
Yeah.
Like, I just want it. And it was, I want it now, but 5 years ago, it was like me now, but like 3 times as much. And I remember being in university and just like, I was doing the courses, and you're also like in the social life and you're trying to figure out even how to be an adult. And I think the biggest stress for me at the time was just like, I didn't feel like I was going all in on me yet.
Hmm.
I hadn't found my thing. I wasn't in the groove yet.
So what advice would you give 20-year-old you now?
It sounds weird, but like, I don't know. I don't actually think I would say too much because I think one of the things I've realized, sometimes you're on the right path, you just need to let things play out.
Mm-hmm.
Just not enough time has elapsed yet. And so...
Well, then what about 5 years from now? So Callum at 30, what advice are you telling yourself now?
The 30-year-old Callum, was he telling the 25-year-old?
Yeah.
Oh, what advice am I telling myself now? It worked.
Hmm.
And the reason I say that is because I think I'm in my period now. And, I study a lot of entrepreneurs. Like I read a lot about entrepreneurs and listen to interviews. And one of the things that I've just picked up just from the patterns, there's a certain entrepreneurial journey. I think there's like an image by Jack Butcher, like a design that he did, where like it's like a graph and it's like ticking up, and just before it ticks up, it's like the person quit here. Like there's a certain this is a difficult thing to do, and it plays with your mind, and the reason it plays with your mind when you're on this journey is you're putting a bunch of work in every day, and every day is different. You're constantly taking on new challenges. One day you're a salesperson. One day you're a marketing guy. The next day you're figuring out taxes. The next day you're trying to shoot content. Every day is different. It's exhausting. You're tired. You're fearful. You feel the pressure. And it's like, it's just, you're putting in this work every day, showing up, and you haven't seen the results yet. And the fact that you're not seeing the results, it really plays with your mind. And so I think that's the period that I'm in, where it's like I'm putting the work in, I'm dedicating myself, but there's still so much uncertainty. And I think when you have uncertainty, there's a moment of fear or moments of doubt where you're like, you believe in yourself, and I believe in myself to the utmost, but it's like you have those moments of doubt where you're like, am I going to get it done?
Yeah.
Like, is it going to pan out? Like, when is it going to pan out? And so...
Well, this goes back to our exercise, which is, like taking a step back.
Yeah.
Oftentimes when it feels like I'm putting in all of these inputs, but I'm not getting the outputs that I'm looking for, it's because we haven't done a good enough job analyzing what output am I actually optimizing for. And so am I optimizing to grow my audience? Or do I just need to pay the bills right now? So those are two very different inputs. And so maybe I'm doing the inputs for one thing when I really want the outputs for something else. And so being able to, give yourself that outside coaching to go, well, what are the actions that is my day actually optimizing for the thing that matters most to me right now? How do I make sure that I'm setting myself up for future success rather than what I think I want most in the future? And there's a very different distinction between those two.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think for me personally, it's weird. I've never built obviously like a huge audience, and I just see the power of the conversations, and like I just there's a certain energy in the room.
Totally.
And you're like, and it's something I just have a lot of calm to it, because I'm like, you just need to play it out. Like if you're an NBA team trying to win a championship and you have the right culture, you have the right players, you have the right coach, you just need to play out the 82 games. Then you need to play out the 16 games in the playoffs. And that's how I feel about this. I'm like, this is just going to play out.
Totally.
And like, as long as I stay in the right space and my focus is there and the consistency is there, then like, you can't tell me we're not going to be like the biggest podcast, because I just think like, or be the biggest podcast in the genre, because I just think it's going to play out. The second piece of what you spoke about is the thing that the 30-year-old Callum would need to reassure the Callum now about. Yeah. Which is the paying the bills, the money-making piece, the business aspect, the monetizing it. That's what I would want to tell myself, like, it worked. Like, you did it. Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, We say this all the time. You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And you've done a phenomenal job of like, not just surrounding yourself with people that you aspire to be like, but also learning from them. So, you and I were talking about before we started recording, just how much you analyze other podcasts and analyze other content creators and what makes them special. When you're doing that, when you're surrounding yourself with that, you can't help but become that average. I mean, we say that all the time, but very few people are actually taking advantage of it. We know proximity is power, but then you look at the average person, you ask them about their dreams, then you ask them, who are they spending their time with? And they say they want one thing, but then on Friday night, they're just getting drunk and they're not doing the things that they need to do in order to achieve their goals. And I think that that's probably something that is different from you that I've seen from anyone else, is that you truly do live that. You are trying to make sure that proximity is truly power and that you are aligning yourself with who you want to become with the Callum of 30 years old.
You know what? I love it. And I want to throw the question to you, back at you. Ayman 5 years from now, what do you think you would tell yourself?
So what am I telling the Ayman from 5 years ago?
Or what is the Ayman from 5 years from now? What is he telling the Ayman that's sitting before me right now? Like, what is he telling him?
You did it. I think that this life right now is very much an intentional creation. The ability to work with these world-class CEOs and helping them get to 9 figures and beyond from their cell phone. I think that the life that I've created, the ability to work with only CEOs that I really enjoy working with, that my weekly calendar, my monthly calendar, my yearly calendar is 100% exactly what I want to do. Every time I wake up, I am excited about what the day has for me. Yeah, to me, I think 5 years ago, Ayman is congratulating the Ayman that I've become.
It's interesting because even when even though I know it's not true, but like there's such a tendency to think that other people have it all figured out. And when I've worked with you and I've spoken to you, it seems like you have all the things you just listed. It feels like it's like figured out right now. And so I'm curious for you, like when you're awake at night and when your head hits the pillow or when you just have those quiet moments throughout the day, what is creating the fear? What is creating the doubt? What is the thing that you're like, when you say that the Ayman 5 years from now is saying that you did it, what is it that you did? What is it that you overcame?
One of the most powerful exercises you can run is a thing called anti-goals, which is, what are the things that I hate? How do I craft a life that I would dread? So if you were to create the world's worst day for Callum, what would that look like? Like waking up to a screaming alarm, sit in traffic for 2 hours, work for a boss that you hate, for a company that you don't align with. Like, what would be the worst day in the world for you?
What's funny? I actually, and I don't want to throw them under the bus, but like with my with my first job, I kind of experienced it.
Yeah.
And I remember having this feeling near the end where like I've never felt this in my life. And I've heard people talk about depression and how it feels. Never thought that I would experience that. And I don't actually think I was fully I was depressed, but I remember waking up and just feeling like heavy, like feeling like a stone.
Yeah.
Like you sleep 8 hours, but it feels like you haven't slept at all.
Totally.
And the reason why was, I've realized the thing that gives me the most joy, and it sounds corny, but it's just like being myself. It's like being Callum. Is feeling that I'm in my element.
Totally.
I love being like differentiated. I love just being me. And I realized that the reason this job brought me to that place was I just started to feel like everyone else. And I was putting more and more work in to try and, because I always want to be like, I'm competitive. Like I want to be like the best. And I was putting more and more in to try and be this person that they would like, that would thrive in this environment. And it was just getting worse and worse. And so it was this mixture of like failure mixed in with I was like failing and I was being someone else in the process. And that combination, I was like, this is like hell. Like this can never occur again.
Yeah.
And to be honest, it set the foundation for
Totally.
where I am at now, because now everything I do is double down on things that are unique to me.
Totally.
Because even what you said about anti-goals, I'm trying to run away from that as much as I'm also
Totally.
going towards like the things that inspire me.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, if you take a look at your North Star, you were sitting there holding a compass and this job was a magnet and it was pulling you off course and you recognized it. You know, unhappiness, depression is when your blueprint for what success looks like doesn't match your reality. And what was happening was there was a misalignment between the path that you were on versus the path you knew you were destined to take. And once you got off that path and got back on track, all of a sudden that depression transitioned to happiness because you recognize that, you know, the column for 30 years when you're 30 years old is like, you're on the right path. It's because you've made that decision. You recognized the anti-goals. You recognized the things you hated was the life you were living. And now you're crafting a life that is more alignment with what you're. And so my recommendation is continuously run that exercise. What do you hate about today? What do you hate? Because nothing's perfect. And that's the great thing about life is we get to continuously reinvent our day, reinvent our week. And ultimately that becomes our life. And so, you know, just because you are off that path doesn't mean there isn't more room for refinement. So continuously going back to that well becomes so much easier to go, well, what do I hate? How do I improve that? And then that gives you the space to go, well, then what do I love? And how do I go towards that?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, one thing listening to you, I think that becomes clear is, and these are always the most impressive people to me, is like the clear thinkers. People that can take on, it's funny actually, I was listening to a podcast last night. I was listening to Sean Puri from My First Million talk about Emmett Shear, who was the CEO of Twitch. I think he resigned or he left in like the last couple of days. And Sean worked with him. They were in the same company. They worked at Twitch together when Twitch acquired his company. And he was talking about Emmett and like some of the things that he learned and what it was like working with him. And he said the most impressive thing about Emmett Shear was he would sit in these meetings and, you know, all of his direct reports are telling him all of this information. They're presenting their ideas, what we think we should do and all of this. And he would just sit there and he would listen and everyone else would be talking and they'd ask questions and whatever. And after a moment, at some point in the meeting, he would kind of step up and it would be time to talk. And he would instantly get to the heart of the problem. He was able to take a whole like ocean of information that was being thrown at him. And he was very easily able to like condense it into like, okay, this is the one thing we need to do. This is where we need to direct our focus. And so I'm curious for you, who are some of the CEOs or just some, not even CEOs, just people in general, people that you've been around that you're just like, this guy is like really like fucking impressive?
You know, as a society, we over-index for the black belts of the world and we don't respect the brown and the purple belts as much. And to me, I respect people that are incredibly well-rounded, but also very intentional with what they do, but then are also black belts in a certain area of their arena. So I think that there's an old adage, don't meet your heroes, but I think it's more of a function of like, don't put your heroes on a pedestal. Rather understand where are they a black belt and then understand what are they actually trying to optimize for. There's so many people that are black belt arenas in multitude of areas that I respect highly. And I look at them and as like inspiration and try to take elements of what they're doing and figure out ways that I can incorporate it in the way that would feel authentic to me, but also align with what matters most to me. And, you know, obviously I was able to work closely with Noah Kagan. He's one of the world-class marketers, and being able to see the behind the scenes was absolutely phenomenal of the way that he was able to, you know, people forget the chokehold sumo.com had on you couldn't go to a website without seeing a sumo.com pop up or a social share button. And I was, you know, in that room seeing them, you know, celebrate their first 1 billion page views. And The ability to see that, even now with him launching his YouTube channel, Cody Sanchez has done a phenomenal job just instantly overnight. She spoke at SumoCon in 2017. She wasn't even on the main stage at the time. She was doing a breakout. And so seeing her meteoric rise has been absolutely phenomenal. And her ability to build an entire content engine around that. I've been lucky enough to interact with, the Hermosis, both Layla and Alex, and seeing the team that they've built and how clear-sighted they both think. And the partnership that the two of them have been able to create is really phenomenal. I also look at the Justin Welsh and the Dan Coes of the world that are creating these one-person, 7-figure businesses. That's the way they want to build. That's their black belt. And I think those individuals where they're able to craft out a life for themselves, that's very intentional with their strengths and the way they want their life to be, I think is really, really interesting. And I try to take small elements from all of the things that I admire about all of them and figure out how can I bring that not just to myself, but some of the CEOs that I work with.
That's interesting. One thing I love about doing these episodes and like just longer form content in general, you really get to like sit with a person and really start to understand them. And it's interesting for me, and like from my vantage point as the one asking the questions, as the time elapses, as you spend more time with them, it just starts to organically become clear like what they're special at. You just start to feel it. And it's not even what they say directly, it's the little things that they say. Small moments, things they do, sometimes just where their attention is. Kind of shows you're like, oh, okay. Like it makes sense. Like I see why they got the success now. Take any of those names you just mentioned. From spending time with them, what are some of the things that you've just noticed and you've been like, okay, I spent the day with Cody Sanchez, like, oh yeah, like it makes sense. Spent the day, or like obviously you spent a ton of days with Noah Kagan. It's like, oh yeah, like I see why he built this huge marketing engine and now his YouTube's taken off. Like, right. Oh yeah, that stacks up.
Totally.
Like, what would you say some of those things are?
I think all of those individuals that I named, they're deeply authentic to themselves. They understand their strengths and they really double down on it. I think that they've done a phenomenal job of going, how do I obsess, talking about that word obsession, how do I obsess about this thing in order to build out that engine? I mean, Cody Sanchez has entire Notion databases thinking about content where she's breaking down her competitors, what's worked, what's not, what are they talking about? She has entire teams dedicated to, hey, like this is an Instagram team and this is my TikTok team. And those are all different skill sets and different, she uses the adage, she treats each of these platforms like a mistress, and every mistress requires a different type of love, care, and attention. And so if you take a look at the way she's been able to handle content, the way she does Twitter is very different than the way she does TikTok, is very different than the way she does YouTube. And so they've become obsessive about what makes them unique and obsessive about their strengths. And so I think the more that you can deeply understand your strengths and double down and get obsessive about those things, to me, I respect and admire that quite a bit.
Here's where I want to end. I think one thing that's been, it's just impressive, man. Like when I speak to you, and I mentioned it earlier, it's the structure, but it's more than the structure. It's like the way that you talk and the way that you think, it follows repeatable lines. And there's always a quote, there's always a person, there's always something. I remember I always used to think about that, even when I was early in my career in meetings with senior people. It's like sometimes someone must ask you a question and you just don't know the answer. Like, what do you do then? Like everyone's looking at you in the room and they're like, he's the CEO. He's the guy that's meant to know. Sometimes you just don't know. And so one of the things that I really wanted to ask you and really find out the answer to is I told you what was my moment when it just felt kind of low. Like it just, I didn't really feel like myself. And it was one of the few times in my life where I've been like a bit lost. I haven't always known the answer, the direct answer to a question, but I've kind of known what I'm working with. I've always like believed in myself. And the fact that that was there, it gave me a lot of confidence. I didn't even need to know the answer. I'm curious if there is a time in your life where you just felt lost, just didn't know the answer.
I remember being at Microsoft and looking around the room and realizing how many of my peers that had joined Microsoft with me were aspiring for VP and up level positions, and seeing their ambitions and recognizing that the more they talked about it, the more I felt repulsed by that direction. I knew that was right for them, but I knew it wasn't right for me. And I remember going down a deep, dark path of like, I should feel happy. Like, this is a dream job. This was something that I remember just being so excited for getting this position. And why does this career path not feel right for me? And it goes back to, I was holding my compass, but the allure of this brand name, the allure of this direction had a magnet that was directing me in the wrong direction. And I needed to go back and go, when I do the corner office test, am I excited about who's in the corner office? Am I excited about that life? Or do I know there's another path for me? And it took me a while to realize that no, the right path for me is more towards entrepreneurship, more towards small business. I want to have a direct impact on the bottom line. I do not want to make another PowerPoint presentation that doesn't see the light of day. And for me, going through that dark moment really put me on the path that I am on today, that to me feels more aligned with the direction that I'm going. I think you mentioned earlier, you are in a very similar situation. And I think it's important for us to go through those dark moments, those anti-goal moments where we're going, the path that we're on, we should feel happy about, but instead we feel anything but. And those are actually the most beautiful moments, because that is you hitting the soft gravel on the road and realizing that, hey, you're about to go off this road and you may crash. And it's an opportunity for you to recognize the rumbles in the steering wheel and slowly direct yourself on the path that you were destined for, the path that you were born for.
Yeah. No, it's all part of the journey. It's all part of the journey. That moment, it's like a powerful moment. Even the feeling, and just like, even when you say like repulse, like, that's like a powerful emotion just to have. If I took the Ayman from that time and I brought him into this room and he met Ayman that's sitting in front of me right now, and you guys had a conversation, and you spent time with each other, how do you think the Ayman from that time would feel if he met you now?
I think he'd shake his hand. I think that the things that I was excited about, the things that I wanted, the life that I wanted to create. I mean, I have old journals written full of goals, and now I'm like, I've blown past all of them and I have to go and create new goals. And the fact that I've been able to accomplish this in 5 years, I think is something that he would feel very excited about. And I think that's important for you to recognize that, there's an old quote, we overestimate what we can accomplish in a year, and we underestimate what we can accomplish in a decade. And I think that's really important for us to always be analyzing, like, where was I 5 years ago? What was I striving for? What goals and dreams keep coming up? And how am I working towards that? And how am I crafting a life that is getting me closer to that vision rather than taking me away from that vision? So, I think the Ayman from 5 years ago would shake my hand and feel very excited and go, this is what we accomplished in 5 years. It's going to be scary what we accomplish in the next 5.
I love it. Thank you for coming on the pod, my man.
Colin, appreciate it, sir.
Very fun, very fun. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the channel. We're having fire conversations every week on the podcast. Before we end the episode, a quick word from our sponsor, Free Agency. What if I told you there is a good chance you're leaving money on the table in your career? It would kind of annoy you a bit, right? Well, Free Agency aims to stop that. They represent and manage talent in the tech industry. Here's how they do it. First, they provide you with a dedicated talent agent. Think about this as your career quarterback. They understand you and your career goals. Based on that understanding, they bring you suitable interviews at top firms. You focus on smashing the interview, And together with their network, research, negotiation expertise, they will make sure you get a top of market salary. Stop job searching alone and start building your dream career today with free agency.